Carolyn, who's running late. They're flying to a family wedding. Also hitching a ride on Kennedy's plane is his sister-in-law, Lauren Bissett.
Any word from your sister?
No, stuck in traffic, I guess.
We're dropping you at Martha's Vineyard, right?
Yeah.
All right.
John plans to drop Lauren off and continue on with his wife to the Kennedy family compound at Hyannisport, Massachusetts.
I think that he was impatient to get to the wedding. He was probably testy, who wouldn't be.
I want to be ready to go as soon as she gets.
Though he's had his pilot's license for more than a year, this will be the first time Kennedy has flown solo since breaking his ankle 6 weeks ago in a hang gliding accident.
He liked extreme sports. He liked to take risks. He liked to push limits. He wasn't satisfied with living just in the straight and narrow lane.
At 8:20 p.m., Kennedy's wife, Carolyn Bissett, arrives at the airport.
Carolyn Bissett was an American beauty. She was this goddess-like creature with her beautiful blonde hair pulled back. They really were this amazingly beautiful couple together.
All right, ladies, hop in. I just have to do a walk around, and then we can get going. Hey, it's gonna be a nice weekend.
Since marrying John 3 years ago, Carolyn has been forced into the media spotlight. Paparazzi hound the famous couple at every turn.
They still went out, they went jogging, they went walking with the dog, and they did their best to keep having a life.
The constant scrutiny turns up signs of tension between the couple. There are rumors that the marriage is in trouble. Still limping from his accident, Kennedy makes a final pre-flight check of his new plane, a Piper Saratoga.
It's top-of-the-line, single-engine, 6-seater. It was well-equipped with a GPS, a global positioning system. The selling point for the Saratoga is it has 4 club seats facing each other in the rear of the aircraft. Seatbelts on, please. There's some headsets back there if you want to listen in. All right, battery on, fuel pump on, and propeller is clear.
The flight to Martha's Vineyard should take about 90 minutes. After that, it's just a short hop to Hyannisport. The route from Essex County Airport to Martha's Vineyard, he was quite familiar. He'd done it several times. At 8:40 p.m., more than 2 hours behind schedule, the flight gets underway.
75 knots. Oh, yeah.
Like many private pilots, Kennedy is flying under visual flight rules, or VFR.
You stay clear of clouds, you have to have good visibility. You're always looking outside, able to see the horizon, and orient the airplane using your visual cues. And that's the best view of New York you're ever gonna get. Once you turn towards the east, you had a nice view of Manhattan, the Hudson River. On a good day, you can see, 30 miles or so at altitude.
Kennedy cruises at just 5,500 feet, a typical altitude for small planes. Around 9:30 p.m., he leaves the mainland coast behind.
Just leaving Montauk over there.
I don't see a thing.
His flight path was following the coast, so he would want to go south over the Long Island Sound to line up and set up for a long straight in for the runway.
He expects to reach their first destination in about half an hour.
We'll have you on the ground by 10 for sure.
But by 10 o'clock...
Martha's Vineyard Tower? Airport security here.
The air traffic controller at Martha's Vineyard Airport has had no contact with Kennedy's plane.
Any word on that flight? Negative. I haven't been notified of that arrival.
Overdue flights are not uncommon. But as the hours pass with no sign of the Piper Saratoga, a chilling reality sets in. John F. Kennedy, his wife and sister-in-law are missing, without a trace.
The Kennedy curse it's a handy moniker, but there is some truth to it.
The history of the Kennedy family is marred by tragedy. Joseph Kennedy Jr., JFK Jr.'s late uncle, died while on a top-secret mission in World War II. President John F. Kennedy and his younger brother Robert were both assassinated.
And numerous cousins have since died. It does seem like there's some pall over the family sometimes.
At 3 a.m., the FAA calls the Coast Guard and launches a search for Kennedy's plane. Now 5 hours overdue. Curtis Sumlock of the U.S. Coast Guard joins the search.
I think we did have a little bit of a heightened hope that we would find this person because they did have such a tragic history.
The first priority is to narrow the search area, but there's little to go on.
It looks like he didn't file a flight plan.
Kennedy's precise route is unknown. And unlike commercial aircraft, low-flying private planes are not closely monitored by air traffic control. The Coast Guard will have to use radar data to estimate Kennedy's last location. It's an approximation at best. Once planes leave the coast to fly over open ocean, the radar system here only tracks them if they're flying above 1,100 feet.
We don't know what happens after that altitude, so if, for instance, there was some attempt to recover, it could fly 100 yards or it could fly 5 miles. We don't know.
All the searchers know for certain is that Kennedy's plane is missing, and it's up to them to find it. At first light, the U.S. military and local law enforcement joined forces with the Coast Guard in a desperate hunt for Kennedy's plane. Everyone knows that if the small plane ditched at sea, survivors won't last long in the cold Atlantic waters.
The scale of the effort to search for the aircraft, it was massive. Typically, that doesn't happen in most general aviation accidents, but this was JFK Jr., and it captured the eyes of the country and the world.
News that JFK Jr., one of America's favorite sons, is missing stuns the nation. The public wants answers.
As soon as this story broke, the media vans were on the roll, and it seems like every major news organization had a presence in our parking lot.
Trying to spot the 3 survivors in miles of open water is a mammoth task.
It's extremely difficult because you're basically looking for something that's about the size of a basketball and you're flying 100 to 300 feet above that. The outcry from the public was great, and there were people getting in their private boats to go out and help search.
As the search effort continues, all of America seems to hold its breath.
People were captivated by the story because, on the one hand, how could this happen? On the other hand, there was this Kennedy curse.
As the hours pass, millions across America and around the world begin to fear the worst. John Kennedy Jr. may be lost forever. The day after Kennedy's plane went missing, searchers make a grim discovery. Pieces of aircraft debris floating in the fast currents off Martha's Vineyard.
There was part of the nose wheel, some cushions, one of the suitcases was in there, and then various other parts that were unidentifiable from the aircraft.
The shattered pieces leave little hope that anyone is alive.
Everyone was hopeful that there would be another outcome, but it just never came.
Meanwhile, the National Transportation Safety Board is already at work trying to figure out what went wrong.
How you doing?
Former U.S. Army pilot Robert Pierce will be the investigator in charge.
This was a national tragedy. People are going to be wanting answers.
In terms of the visibility, the curiosity by the American people, this was Bob Pierce's biggest assignment as an investigator in charge.
Let's see what the FBI has on him.
Pierce immediately faces the possibility the plane was brought down by a deliberate criminal act.
Well.
FBI files reveal that John F. Kennedy Jr. has been the target of at least 3 kidnapping threats. The most recent, just 4 years earlier, in 1995.
Not everybody loved the guy.
Because it was a political figure on board, there were many causes that were being repeated about potential terrorist attacks, a bomb on board, was it shot down?
The answers could lie with the wreckage, but it's still lost at the bottom of the Atlantic. Navy divers scour the ocean floor searching for sunken debris.
Let's go.
For now, investigators must learn what they can from the Saratoga's flight path. They compile data from coastal radar stations to build a picture of how the plane was flying.
Hey, so far, so good. And just as he leaves the coast, he suddenly starts heading away from Martha's Vineyard. Why is he flying in the wrong direction?
We always consider recorded radar data as a poor man's black box. It's a way to get some information in regards to the flight path, the airspeed, the altitude, and that was very helpful in this investigation.
Let's see what he's doing out there.
About 30 miles from Martha's Vineyard, the plane makes a series of unusual maneuvers.
Okay, first he descends, then he turns right, and climbs again. Level for 1 minute, and left, and right again, followed by a high-speed dive. You know, he's flying like someone who can't control the plane.
The pattern that was indicated by the radar was quite unusual for a normal type of descent and approach to an airport. We don't know at that point exactly why.
Finally, on July 20th, 4 days after Kennedy's plane went down, U.S. Navy divers locate the sunken wreckage and the bodies of the 3 people on board.
Today, we were able to bring closure to 2 families, and I think that we realize is very important.
I can still remember pictures of him saluting as the motorcade went by in the funeral procession. And I think that was probably the hardest part, is seeing the tragic loss of so many other generations there.
John F. Kennedy was really the crown prince of this family. It seems almost Shakespearean in its tragedy to see the way we lost him. What a horrible way to go, and what a sad way. It seemed more than anything tragic to me to have this light snuffed out so soon, when there was so much that he could have done to brighten the world.
Hey, Jeff Gazzetti. Can't wait to see what you have so far.
NTSB investigator Jeff Gazzetti flies out from Washington to join the team.
My boss at the time called me saying, listen, if they find the wreckage, you're going to be the guy that's going up there to lead the examination of the wreckage.
Okay, ready when you are.
He starts by studying video evidence, images of the wreckage captured by Navy divers.
You fast forward to the main wreckage.
For Gazzetti, the way the pieces have fallen and the distance between them are important clues.
You have to answer the first question. Did the airplane crash and disintegrate upon impact, or was there some sort of in-flight breakup?
He hopes to answer that question by locating what investigators call the 4 corners.
Wing, tail, nose.
When the nose, the tail, and the 2 wings are found close together, it's powerful evidence that the plane was intact when it hit the ocean.
Looks like it was in one piece till it hit the water.
All the major components of the airplane were in a localized area 120 feet beneath the surface of the water. So we were very confident that this was not an in-flight breakup.
And that's the best view of New York you're ever gonna get.
The discovery helps put to rest lingering fears that there could have been a bomb on board.
It was important to settle on the fact that this was not an in-flight structural failure, because then we could concentrate on immediately examining the wreckage that we had.
For investigators, eliminating one potential cause is a step forward, but the job has only begun. And Gazzetti knows he'll be feeling intense pressure every step of the way.
The visibility, the crush of the media, the eyes of the world were going to be on this. So from that standpoint, I knew I had to do my job by the book.
Guys, that's tail. We gotta put that back there. The cables, get the cables all together in one spot. Let's keep them over there.
Salvage efforts have recovered 75% of John F. Kennedy Jr.'s Piper Saratoga from the ocean.
If we were ever going to provide a story to the public and to the aviation community and to the family, we needed to glean as much evidence as we could. And that meant trying to find every piece that was available in the wreckage.
Each and every piece, no matter how small, we need to know where it was found.
Investigators begin a methodical analysis of the debris.
I want to see every piece. We start at the wingtips, we work our way in.
The small plane was not required to carry flight recorders. Gazzetti will have to uncover the story behind this crash by interpreting the clues imprinted on the crumpled debris.
Okay, let's see how you hit the water.
If Gazzetti can understand exactly how the plane hit the water, it might tell him what went wrong.
The right wing is much more damaged than the left wing.
Bit by bit, the damage reveals how the plane came down.
When you look at crush marks on a structure, they can tell you a lot. There's something called accordion crush damage, where you just take the structure and the impact just crushes it down and it looks like an accordion, which gives you an idea of what the angle of impact was.
Huh. I wasn't expecting that. The roof's badly damaged, but no damage on the floor. I think they were upside down. Banking right, hit the water, like this.
The discovery paints a terrifying picture of the flight's final moments.
Damn it! Come on! Come on!
Investigators know how the plane hit the water, but they still don't know why. And mounting public pressure is never far from their minds.
I had heard that there was a newspaper that was offering $250,000 for any photograph of the wreckage. And since I was in charge of taking photographs of the wreckage, I had to make sure that all the photographs were going to be secured and not leaking out.
Ah, damn, it's time for another news conference.
You have pressure from the media. They really want to know what's going on. And if you're a mid-level investigator, you have the pressure from your boss to get things done so that media and the public can actually be informed as to what's going on.
The Saratoga is a single-engine propeller plane. If that engine failed, it might explain why Kennedy lost control of his plane. Gazzetti examines the propeller blades. The way they're bent and twisted tells him they were spinning when they hit the water.
The only way to get that to happen is to have a propeller under power, being propelled by the engine, so you didn't have a power plant problem.
The evidence is clear.
There's nothing wrong with that engine.
Investigators shift their attention to the complex mechanisms that control the motion of the plane.
All right, let's run the cables and see what kind of shape they're in. That's it. Right to the pulley, straight back to the aileron.
A system of cables and rods connects the yoke to the ailerons and flaps. Elevators and rudder that steer the airplane in flight.
What about flight controls? Was there something about the way the airplane was flying that was not pilot-induced, that was actually a problem with the airplane itself?
If a control cable breaks mid-flight,
What the hell?
it can lead to a catastrophic loss of control.
Nothing's working. John, what's going on? It's okay. It's okay.
The entire world wants to know if that's what happened in the night sky off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. A close examination of the flight control system from JFK Jr.'s Piper Saratoga provides conclusive evidence.
And down.
None of the control surfaces malfunctioned in flight.
The aileron cables also seem fine. The cable system was working.
There's also no sign that the cable snapped before the crash.
We found control cables that were separated, but they were separated in what we call tensile overload, where it was just due to impact forces, as opposed to a corroded cable or some sort of pre-existing failure.
Investigators are left to wonder, what else could have brought down JFK Jr.'s plane?
All right, now let's check if the attitude indicator failed somehow.
There's another failure that might explain the bizarre flight path.
You good?
Pilots rely on one instrument more than any other to warn them when they aren't flying straight and level. The attitude indicator tracks the plane's motion in space. up and down, left and right. If it malfunctioned and gave Kennedy faulty information, it might have fooled him into steering the plane into the ocean.
Damn it! Come on! Level up!
We harvested all of those components. We took them to the NTSB materials laboratory and photographed many of them and disassembled them and looked inside.
There goes that idea.
But after a thorough examination of all the aircraft's instruments, the search for clues comes up empty.
The instruments are working perfectly.
Investigators conclude there was nothing wrong with the Piper Saratoga.
We found no evidence of any kind of pre-impact mechanical malfunction.
All right. So you saw him out on the tarmac.
The focus now shifts to the pilot.
Do you know what time that was?
Investigators ask witnesses to help them piece together the final days of John Kennedy Jr.'s life.
Did you have a conversation with Mr. Kennedy?
They hope someone will tell them something that might explain why he lost control of his plane.
He spoke to you, did he?
You're going to want to do kind of a 72-hour analysis of what the pilot was going through prior to the event. What his actions were, what his stressors might have been, who he talked to, what was on his mind, what his physical condition might have been. Those kind of things become very important in an accident like this.
Why did the pilot fail to maintain control of the airplane?
Was there anything out of the ordinary?
They learned that Kennedy was seen leaning on crutches just before the flight.
He had had surgery done on his ankle, and he had just had a walking type of cast removed the day before.
Pilots need both their hands and their feet to fly a plane.
When you apply rudders, the rudder pedal pressure in an airplane, it goes through the leg and through the ankle.
Could Kennedy's injury explain the fatal flight path? A check of medical records provides the answer. Though he was still using crutches some of the time, his records show his ankle was strong enough to fly the plane.
He was fit to fly. That ankle shouldn't have given him any trouble at all.
It's another dead end.
Next.
The search for clues continues, uncovering worrisome details about a rocky marriage and mounting stress in Kennedy's life.
I'm just trying to get a sense of his state of mind. Now, I understand his marriage was going through a rough patch.
For months, John and Carolyn's troubled relationship has been fodder for the tabloids. Perhaps the strain distracted Kennedy from the challenging task of piloting his plane.
Everyone comes out afterwards and talks about this spat and that spat and that she was very difficult and that she was demanding. But you never know how much of that is just kind of people speculating.
Ladies and gentlemen, meet George.
After a high-profile launch, Kennedy's magazine is also in trouble.
No, you shouldn't worry. No, we've got a great plan in place going forward. Yeah. No, it's going to be fine. Yeah.
He genuinely launched that magazine, George, with an interest in providing a voice and vehicle to bring politics to his generation.
No, you have nothing to worry about.
Magazines are pretty expensive and hard to run. It wasn't doing too well by the end.
Now, Mr. Kennedy led a very busy life. I'm sure he had a lot on his mind that night. Maybe that's what rattled him when he was up there.
As in any activity, your state of mind affects your behavior. And for a pilot, that pilot may not realize that the stress he's under can affect how he flies and what his decision-making skills are at that point in relation to how safe is it to go fly today.
Saratoga 90253, ready for takeoff from runway 22.
John Kennedy Jr. appeared to be the definition of grace under pressure. But what was the real story? Did he have the piloting skills to handle the added pressure of flying his own plane?
Over 300 flight hours. He wasn't a total rookie. He had a fair number of flight hours under his belt.
Investigators checked John Kennedy's training records to learn all they can about his experience as a pilot.
So what did he learn in 300 hours? I'd like to try a few ILS approaches again today.
Kennedy had been taking lessons on and off for 17 years, but he had relatively little experience flying on his own.
Starting my descent now.
In Mr. Kennedy's case, of the 310 hours he had, only about 70 to 75 were by himself, flying solo.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
There's another troubling detail.
11 different instructors. I can't imagine any of them got to know the guy too well.
Kennedy trained with a lot of different instructors during those years.
Should I throttle back more?
I would not want to train the way Mr. Kennedy ended up training. I would prefer to stick with one instructor, especially during the instrument portion of that training.
Hey, sorry I'm late. You with me today?
Tim O'Neill was one of John Kennedy's instructors.
He was a very busy person, so he'd be running in and running out. Sometimes he'd be running late.
Hate that highway. It's always packed.
It's not very helpful in the learning process to have other things on your mind.
So, I read what you told my colleague. I just need to confirm a few things.
Investigators learn of another tragic pre-flight choice, one that might have made all the difference.
You actually offered to make the flight with him on that night?
One of his instructors offered to fly with him the day of the crash.
Thanks for the offer, but I want to do it alone. Yeah, no, I appreciate it, though. Thanks.
That is probably the biggest point right here, is he made the decision to continue, not realizing the importance of the stressors that were on him himself and his own limitations.
He's only qualified for visual flying. He hadn't finished his training for instrument-only flights.
Investigators also learned Kennedy was still working towards his instrument rating, a crucial qualification for flying at night or in bad weather.
Instrument flight is one of the hardest ratings to get when you're moving up through your licenses and ratings. And it involves flying without looking outside the aircraft, so that when you're in clouds, you can maintain control of the aircraft.
So he wasn't ready to fly if he couldn't see. So could he see or not? I'll need the most detailed weather available.
With an instrument rating, you're able to take off, fly into, through the clouds, and continue on, where visual flight rules you would be unable to take off.
Computer records reveal that Kennedy checked the weather online at 6:34 p.m. It was a clear day with good visibility. But Carolyn's last-minute shopping and the heavy rush hour traffic pushed their departure time back by more than 2 hours.
Any word from your sister?
No, freaking traffic, I guess.
No, it's Friday. I told her it was going to be jammed.
By that time, weather conditions were deteriorating, with haze making it hard to see the horizon.
I just need to confirm.
Interviews with pilots flying that evening reveal that visibility was especially bad below 6,000 feet, the altitude at which Kennedy was flying.
Must have been pretty hard to see.
There was some haze coming and going, and some stations reported some mist.
Starting to get a bit sucked in. Hope it clears up for the weekend.
Investigators believe Kennedy found himself flying in difficult visual conditions. Conditions too dark and hazy for a pilot used to relying on visual cues instead of instruments.
Not a great night for this guy to be flying.
Weather plays an immense role in all aviation accidents, even the ones that you might not think it would.
They wonder if Kennedy was getting weather updates during the flight.
127.25.
To get accurate information, he would have had to tune his radio to the weather transmission from Martha's Vineyard. The radio from Kennedy's plane is among the many parts salvaged from the ocean. Investigators test the radio to confirm that it was working. Then they check to see if it was set at the right frequency.
Fingers crossed we can figure out what he had dialed in. Show me that frequency again. 126.25. He was off by 1 digit.
Kennedy had tuned his radio to the wrong frequency.
In this case, the frequency was off by one number.
The discovery tells investigators that Kennedy likely wasn't getting the weather updates he needed. But it tells them something else as well. Something that may finally explain the fatal crash that saddened an entire nation. Investigators zero in on a theory that may explain the fatal accident that killed John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife Carolyn, and her sister Lauren. At the center of it all, a pilot in over his head, battling a mounting list of pressures.
No, you shouldn't worry. No, we got it.
I'm having problems at work. I need to get to this wedding. My ankle hurts. I get in the airplane. That's why I bought this airplane. I need to get from point A to point B. That's the whole point of having this airplane and learning to fly. So we're going to go.
I think I know why things started to go wrong.
127 point.
A badly tuned radio and a hazy night allow investigators to imagine a scenario that may explain the flight's tragic end.
It started after he cleared New York.
In hazy conditions, Kennedy would have no visual reference to tell him which way is up.
Visibility was bad, and it's getting worse. He starts his descent.
As it was getting dark in marginal conditions, he was in a very precarious area for visual flight rule and VFR flying. As he headed out over the water, and all those lights were behind him, all that visual reference was gone.
He looks away from his instruments for like a second.
127.25.
Remember, his frequency was off. Maybe he was trying to tune the radio.
He might look to see if the frequency had changed, or if he had got it wrong in his mind.
Still nothing. Just something weird with the radio. No big deal.
While all that's going on, it's quite easy for the airplane to slip into a little bit of a bank, one direction or another.
If you're in a turn for an extended period of time, your inner ear can feel a reverse of the turn, and you can become spatially disoriented very easily.
What the? What? That can't be. When he looks back, his instruments are telling him one thing, his sense is another. What the?
You have to be well trained to disregard what your brain is saying and look at your instruments, work on your scan, and fly by your instruments.
What the hell? John! John!
Just wait. Come on.